Good afternoon, or good morning, it's still morning, sorry. And welcome to the Ways and Means first briefing of the 2025 legislative session. Today we are being briefed by the State Board of Elections. We will start with our very own Stan the Man Ward. And then we will move to our State Director, welcome, Happy New Year, Jared Damaris, and the Deputy State Director, Catherine Berry, and then we'll take questions after everyone has spoken. So with that, Mr. Ward, take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm just going to provide some information to sort of kick off the briefing and set the stage for what's to come, the main event, which is from our State Board of Elections. So I'm going to provide a brief overview of turnout trends since the pandemic. As you know, the pandemic changed the way Marylanders vote. Before the pandemic, the large majority of Marylanders voted in person on Election Day. Roughly 20 to 30% voted early in person, and about 5% voted by mail. In the general election of 2020, held during the pandemic, mail-in voting surged to 50% of total turnout, with most of the remaining ballots cast early in person. There have now been 4 elections since the pandemic, and a few trends are clear. Mail-in voting is higher than before the pandemic, significantly higher, but it is not dominant. The percentage of voting by mail has fluctuated from a high of 39% in the 2024 primary to a low of 25% in the 2024 general election. The vast majority of Marylanders continue to prefer in-person voting. In the 2024 general election, fully 75% of voters cast ballots in person. The most popular voting method for Maryland voters continues to be voting in person in their neighborhood polling places on Election Day. The percentage voting on Election Day varied from 38% in the 2024 general election to 51% in the 2022 general election. Trends in early in-person voting have been mixed. Early voting was very low in the first 3 elections held after the pandemic, with the percentage voting early ranging between 15% and 19%. However, in the 2024 general election, early voting turnout was back up to 32%, similar to pre-pandemic levels. Future elections will tell if the robust 2024 early voting turnout was an aberration or part of a trend. Provisional voting is up slightly since the pandemic. Before the pandemic, provisional voting was generally less than 3% of the total. Since the pandemic, provisional voting has been above 3%, reaching a high of 5% in the 2024 general election. There are several reasons for the increase in provisional voting. One major factor is voters who request a mail-in ballot showing up to vote in person. These voters must vote provisionally. This has become more of an issue with the increased popularity of mail-in voting and the creation of the permanent absentee ballot list. Another important factor is that many polling places were moved in recent years. In 2020, neighborhood polling places were replaced by regional vote centers due to the pandemic. And in the recent redistricting, many polling places were moved, closed, or consolidated. All this change has left some voters confused about where to vote. Voters who do not go to their assigned polling place on Election Day must vote provisionally. The vast majority of provisional ballots cast by voters who are out of precinct are counted, at least in part. It will be interesting to monitor the trends as Marylanders' voting habits continue to evolve in future elections. And that's all I have, Madam Chair. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. If not, we can go to the State Board of Elections.
Are there any questions for Mr. Ward? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Damaris, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, so I just want to say thank you for inviting us here to share our successes of the presidential election and just where we're going to talk about some of our areas of improvement and focus on the preparations for the 2026 gubernatorial election. Beginning, I just want to commend my state board members for their leadership and working as a team. Each brought a unique perspective to representing their political dynamics and Maryland as a whole, and they worked in a bipartisan fashion throughout this electoral process, and I want to thank them for their dedication. With me here is Catherine Berry, the State Deputy Administrator, and then Alan Norfleet here, who's the Director of Candidacy and Campaign Finance. Just talking about some of our accomplishments since I've been taking over here. First, I just wanted to talk about a little bit of a rebrand that the State Board of Elections did. We launched a new logo in March of 2024, which integrated the colors and patterns of the state flag, and we have 7 stars to celebrate Maryland being the 7th state in the union there. Additionally, we have a little bit of a logo now, which were the words verify, open, trusted, empowering, which if you take the first letter of each of those spells vote. Just always to underscoring our commitment to open and transparent elections in Maryland. Additionally, we did a lot of reorganization of the State Board of Elections to reflect the new realities of election administration. We created a new Department of Audits to help with the integrity of elections. We also have a mail-in ballot director because, as you saw, there is mail-in ballots, and I'll get a little bit more into the trends myself on that front there. Additionally, we have a CISO, which is a State Information Security Officer that is now a state employee rather than a contractual employee. This has been a huge accomplishment for us, meaning that now we have both all our IT all in-house. Which means that now their focus is on their primary responsibility is protecting the State Board of Elections and the state, and are not just vendors. Officially, we're also now looking at hiring a joint communications director. This position will be split between the local boards of elections and the state board for costs. This will help with a lot of our Public Information Act requests and our outreach as well. This will be a supplement to our voter outreach program that we currently have, and making sure we have more grassroots activities with the locals. So this was something that we talked to the local boards of elections with, and they were very happy with this idea of having a person dedicated to helping them with the Public Information Act. We're also very aware of the current budgetary crisis that is going on here and have tried to help as much as we can. We have downsized and relinquished a lot of our office space in a cost-saving measures here for the state. This will, because of what we have, we didn't need to have that large of a footprint anymore at our statewide office. It has boosted morale because it has really shown that hybrid teleworking is here. We have worked well with it, and we've continued to do it. And so personnel was very happy with it, and office sharing is just now a new reality that they all accepted. We do some team building exercises to make sure that we always see each other in person, but overall, we can still telework and provide a high level of service. I visited each of the local boards of elections in their warehouses. I'm planning on doing that again in '25. I don't have to do such a high schedule as I did before. I can take my time across the time here, but I definitely enjoyed that. In the past, I did mention the fact that we established a Maryland Election Administration Education Program. This was a professional class for election officials and staff, and this is helping the local boards with understanding the modern transition of election administration, but it's beneficial to a lot of the local directors as well who are new. And this is looking at the trends here because there are turnovers at that local level here. This is helping the continuation of knowledge base, and it's making sure that the locals that are new are able to feel that they're able to handle any and all challenges there. We have done a lot of improvement in relationship with the local boards of elections. When I had my first meeting with the local boards of elections, I said that there should be no daylight between the State Board of Elections and the local boards. Success for one is a success for all, and when one fails, we all fail. because that's how we're painted in election administration here. So therefore, it was one of the big things here. We have more coordination with the local boards. We had daily check-ins during election periods, and even more frequent check-ins with the new election directors as well, to make sure that they were caught up and making sure that they felt that they were prepared for the 2024 elections. Along the lines there, I helped even make sure that Mayo developed a mentoring program, so it wasn't just the state helping the newer members, but also direct member-to-member mentoring as well for the newer members. We had monthly collaboration meetings, and we are working with a lot of the local boards as partners in their office moves. We have new regulations on the minimum requirements for office space as well as warehouses, which they found very beneficial because they have to deal with the county administrations on that, which we are very much involved in as well. And overall, I did a lot of personal wellness check-ins during the 2024 elections, which caught a few by surprise, getting a random phone call from the state administrator, but it was all for good purposes there, and they did like that. We held 2 tabletop exercises, and I wanted to thank the Howard County Board of Elections and the Maryland Department of Emergency Management for coordinating those. They were not just only great proactive planning tools, but also great at team building and getting us all together here and giving us scenarios that you just don't think about in a crisis management. So it's been fantastic. Outreach, of course, is one of the biggest things that I wanted to touch on here. We're always combating dis and misinformation on elections and the electoral process. We are the trusted source of information, and being as the trusted source of information means that as being accessible to the public as possible. So there was lots of press interviews that you saw prior to, during, and after the election, and I helped try to build my social media presence as well, reaching voters on the vehicles in which they themselves get the news on. And, you know, this is also one of the things, too, is being proactive, which I'm very proud of, like how I do my administration, is, you know, making sure that when we see a trend that is happening outside of Maryland, that we are making sure that Marylanders are aware of that before it reaches the shore here. We saw that with the texting scam on voter registration, as well as ballot marking devices and possible vote flipping in other states, and we made sure that we had press releases out and information out to the voters as quickly as possible to warning them about the voting scam that, you know, will occur, and also that the ballot marking devices are not vote flipping at all. One of the things, too, which I was proud of, was expanding voting opportunities to historically disenfranchised communities. I visited a correctional facility myself and spoke to those inmates, registering inmates at that facility in Anne Arundel County. I designated the Native American Lifelines as a voter registration agency this year, last year, and it was help celebrating the 100-year anniversary of Native Americans achieving the right to vote. We've expanded the voter address confidentiality program to ensure survivors of domestic violence having the right to make their voices heard safely and securely without risk of endangering themselves or their loved ones. We've made sure that our elections were very secure. We engaged our state and federal partners and working collaboratively on maintaining the highest standards of security. And we have weekly cyber hygiene scans of our websites and systems from CISA. And that's just the cyber part of it, but we also maintain physical security as well because of the threats that had occurred. Overall, one of the big things is being open and transparent, and this goes a long way to help defeating or dispelling any mis or disinformation, because that is the keystones here. Our polling place, early voting center, and drop-box plans were all posted on our websites, as well as the local board canvas schedules. And we included status updates on procurements at our board meetings and our state administrators' reports. But also being transparent is not just, you know, providing information out there, but it's also tackling issues that have occurred and making sure that the voters understand that the process is safe and secure, even when an issue can occur, which was in Baltimore City. We had a memory stick management problem there at that point there, which we addressed immediately. And we had a vote discrepancy in Prince George's County primary election, which was discovered by the State Board of Elections post-election audit. Both of them were addressed immediately and making sure that voters had confidence in the results that were being posted and moving forward. Overall, one of the things that I was trying to do is change the culture at the State Board of Elections, being more proactive and less reactive, being a partner with the General Assembly and advocates and the local boards of elections. We are also looking at using new technologies such as AI, language assistance programs to help voters at the polls, and using text to cure. So those are one of the bigger things there. I've always said this to any of the advocates or anybody here. I'm always wanting to meet with anybody. I might not always agree with you, but I'm always looking to improve the voting experience and trying to achieve 100% voter turnout, because that is my mission. Making sure everyone who can vote does vote. We had some unforeseen events that I just want to mention here. Most notably, almost a year ago, we had to cancel the poll book contract. We recognized the immediacy of the election and that the poll book vendor could not deliver a solution that would meet the minimum requirements to conduct a statewide election, so we had to end that contract. We initiated our contingency plan, which was to use the existing poll books and procure. This was one of the cooler things that I enjoyed, which was I procured all the remaining poll books that we use throughout the United States. I scoured every state. Georgia had a few in a warehouse. We procured them all. We had them shipped up here. So we own all the current poll books that we have. There are no more existing in the United States whatsoever. Maryland has them all. So that's one of the nicer things that I did. But once again, it was just a contingency plan there, but we had to do it. We had a special election in Prince George's County because, I love elections so much that I wanted to have 3 instead of 2. So we had that in between the primary and the general, and that was a vote by mail election, which had its own challenges just trying to conduct that while preparing for the general election as well. We had some litigation for early voting centers during the primary, and we had some voter confusion with specimen ballots in the primary elections where a local board had sent out people were voting the specimen ballots instead of actual ballots, and that occurred. And one of the things was immediately after that, we saw a little bit of a trend, and the state board implemented a policy that made sure that everyone had to use the state template, and therefore they were generally uniform across the state prior to the general election, and we did not see that issue occur in the general election whatsoever. So once again, being proactive and seeing that, making sure that we address that as quickly as possible. We did have, I would say, some tragic events here during the 2024 election. Maryland received a threatening letter from the United States Traitor Elimination Army prior to the election about our voter registration process. We had received bomb threats as well 3 days after the election during the canvass. None of those threats had disrupted our operations or intimidated us from our mission in providing services to the Marylanders. And also knowing the fact that the General Assembly and the governor had our backs with the passage of House Bill 585 last year, which was the protecting of the election officials, helped us understand that sad reality of that people want to, I would say, cause chaos with the electoral process or intimidate election officials or election judges. That we had comfort in that, knowing that was there. For the future, One of the things is we want to make sure that we have more staff, that, I'm looking at making sure that we have no single points of failure in our staffing there. As we pass more laws here, we want to make sure that we have a good pipeline to make sure that we don't have any burnout there, as well as making sure that as people I would say retire or move out, that we don't necessarily lose 100% of the knowledge, because then we have a backup individual behind there knowing the position already there. We continue to work with the local boards of elections and Mayo. We are right now, you're not thinking about it, but I'm thinking about redistricting already as we move forward with it. Because we have a lot of new members there, we have to make sure that we're trying to make that they're caught up to speed. And if there's other retirements along the way there, making sure that their processes and that knowledge transfer has begun for that folks. Process. We're working also collaboratively with them on future procurements, which is including the poll books, a new voting system, and the voting registration system. We're preparing for a biannual conference and making sure that if turnover does exist again, we have the mentoring programs in place and enough knowledge transfers for any of the local election directors. Overall, I'm also helping ERIC, which is the Electronic Registration Information Center that Maryland is a part of, to expand to more states. The more states that are in ERIC, the better our voter registration lists are, because then we can make sure that as a person is registered in another state that failed to notify Maryland, that we make sure our rolls are as clean as possible. And again, I'm trying to engage in as many new technologies as possible to, I would say, streamline the voting process here, but also to have more outreach with voters. And one of the things that I want to engage in or want to create is creating a digital voter registration card, so that it would go right into your iPhone or into your phone yourself there, kind of like what MVA has currently. And so when we have, say, emergency changes in a polling place due to a pipe burst, right? Right now, I kind of do basically, I'll put it out as a social media post, right? I posted, or I'll do a press release. This way, if it was there, we can actually know the individual. It could pop up and with a little 1 next to it and say, oh, your polling place has changed, is the way to communicate with voters in a fast, secure method there. So we're looking at that and making sure that we can have as much contact with the voter as possible about their voting locations and, how and what they're registered as well. So that also should help cut down maybe on some provisional voting as well. On some laws that were passed in our implementation. Again, I can't thank you enough on the passage of House Bill 585, which is the protecting of election officials. I think this also helps with our recruitment positions as well, knowing that they are not going to be harassed in their jobs. In House Bill 459, which is the Election Director Evaluation Plan, we are meeting with the local boards to provide evaluations on the election directors, and my evaluation with the state board is upcoming this month as well. House Bill 333, which was the disinformation on social media, the online portal. We had 121 cases since August 1st, and 5 were sent to the state prosecutor for further investigation. We did a lot of promoting of this portal for reporting disinformation, and we even had a video that I had on the website about that as well. House Bill 700, which is about election judges, the marketing campaign, we did a survey of election judges on why individuals became election judges to help kickstart off this marketing campaign. Most notably, what I found as a little bit of a trend is that younger election judges like the money, and older election judges do it for civic pride. So, so you know, as we move forward with this, one of the things is that, you know, with election judges here, if we want to recruit younger people, we're going to have to up the price a little bit as well. So, you know, we'll slowly move them into civic pride, but initially they need money. So now I'm going to just talk a little bit about some turnouts and some trends. A lot of Stan has already mentioned there. The primary election was about, we had over 1 million voters, but that was roughly under 28% of the eligible voters in that election had turned out. Again, in-person voting accounted for 57.5% of all voting, with early voting accounting for under 15% of that voting there. And mail-in voting accounted for 39% of turnout for the primary election. In the general election, we had over 3 million voters, or over 72%. In-person voting accounted for 70% of all voting there. And as it was noted earlier, early voting went to its normal about 33% of the accounting for that, where mail-in accounted for slightly over 25%, and provisional voting counting for about 5%. Overall, I have my own analysis as well of post-COVID voting in Maryland, because I think the one thing about it is, you know, prior to COVID, all those habits now are gone for election administration. The 2020 election was an outlier because it was COVID, and now we have into a post-COVID analysis and moving forward with it and how Marylanders are voting from now on. So one of the things that I noticed is that Marylanders do like voting early, with roughly 55% of Marylanders choosing to vote before Election Day. Mail-in ballots are here to stay. With even on the general election, you had over nearly 880,000 mail-in ballots were sent out. That means about 1 in 5 voters requested a mail-in ballot for the general election. And over 630,000 were sent out in the primary elections, which is roughly 17% of all eligible voters requesting a mail-in ballot. So they are there. Nearly 600,000 are on the permanent mail-in ballot list, and the ages for that is 31% are from 45 to the 65 age range, and 45% are 65 and older. So permanent mail-in ballots are more from 45 and older, is the substantial majority there. Web delivery ballots hover around 12 to 16% of all mail-in ballot requests. Age is not a determining factor in making web delivery ballots. 16% are delivered to 24 and under voters. 30% are delivered to voters between the ages of 25 and 44. 32% are in the 45 to 65 range, and 22% are in the 65 and older range. Web ballot delivery is also the preferred method of delivery for UOCAVA voters, which is 75% of all their ballots are web delivery received. The one thing about web ballot deliveries is volume is a concern for our canvassing, especially with the duplication, and we are looking at technical solutions now for helping the process, and also providing greater information to the voters on what is actually needed for web ballot deliveries. A lot of them also forget that they need to have their own printer and stamp involved there to make sure that there. And a couple of other trends is that we're looking at is the rate of return of web ballot deliveries is less than mailed ballots to individuals as well. And we can't figure out why there is there. But voters voted and returned over 87% of mailed-in ballots when they requested it, so they're slightly higher than the turnout percentage of in-person voting. Again, mail-in voting has not replaced in-person voting as a preferred method. So mail-in, is here to stay, but is still not the preferred method there. One of the other interesting facts is I think election timing may impact voting method. There seems to be a trend developing that more voters vote by mail in a primary election rather than in a general election. And maybe that could be the result of that the elections are held during the summer or when people are away or are vacationing rather than in the general election when everyone kind of knows about that. I am going to do a little bit more of a deeper dive into those stats as well, figuring out if like you had a person that just how many people actually voted by mail in the primary election, and then if they voted early as well in person, because you saw a shift in the 2024 election where mail was almost it was 39% and early voting was 15%, but then in the general election, you saw mail drop down to 25%, but early voting increased back up to its pre-COVID levels of nearly 30% or above. So are those the same voters, and are they just shifting because they want to keep voting early and knowing the method? But again, we have to do a little bit more analysis on that, and we only have 2 data points of the post-COVID election here. The use of drop boxes continues to be successful here, but we had 286 drop boxes in the general election. But overall, the percentage of people using them was slightly less this time around than in prior election years. But one of the other trends that we saw was provisional voting to increase. This election here, provisional voting was historically high for the general election. We had over almost 150,000 provisional ballots cast. And, you know, again, this was a large, I would say, voters going to polling places other than their assigned places and, you know, receiving a mail-in ballot and then choosing to vote instead. So that was kind of one of the trends there. One of the nicer trends that the General Assembly had passed was talking about same-day voter registration. And we saw a huge surge of the use of same-day registration in the 2024 general election. So prior to the 2024 general election, almost 58,000 individuals had registered and voted, and we had over 26,000 voters use it for change of addresses. So that's from the start of when you passed the law all the way through to the 2024 primary election. Those were the total numbers of it all, which was great because it helped enfranchise those individuals to vote the right ballots. In the 2024 general election alone, we had nearly 58,000 people register and vote during early voting and election day. You know, and we saw an additional over 7,500 use it to update their addresses. So almost 58,000 people same day registered in this election itself. So that was phenomenal, and it was amazing to see. I mean, people use that. So, you know, that law helped enfranchise lots of people. Some more operational information for you. We had 97 early voting centers. We had 1,500 polling places. We had 286 drop boxes. We had 4,701 primary ballot styles. We had 1,974 general election ballot styles. We had 5.7 million ballots were printed for in-person voting in the primary, and 9.4 million were printed for the general election. We had engaged in an aggressive voter outreach program focusing on registering to vote and then the 3 ways to vote, which was early, by mail, and on election day. We developed a dynamic, user-friendly landing page with various deadlines associated with each. And one of the nice features about this was that the deadlines themselves could be seamlessly uploaded onto your calendar or on your phone so that you would have easy reminders of it. So it'd be like, oh, this is the day I needed to register to vote, or this is the window for early voting. So we try to, again, make sure that technology and getting it to the voters' hands as possible. We did also paid outreach as well. We did 108 TV spots, over 450 radio spots, which had about 2.8 million impressions, 13 print ads, but mostly I focused on digital because digital is I would say a very direct method and has the most impact. Our digital ads generated over 26 million impressions. We had about 7.3 million plays of digital ads, with Facebook and Instagram being the most popular of our methods. And we had reached 2.8 million meta accounts of Maryland voters, and this was verified. So if you want to think about that, there's only 4.1 million registered voters in the state of Maryland, and of which we were able to target and, actually get ads to 2.8 million just on basically Facebook and Instagram. So with all their accounts there. So we really did try to target and make sure that Marylanders were well aware of this alone. And that one little fact, just going on Meta, we had established over 10 million impressions alone. One of the other things too, which was about our election judges and pages. For the election, we had almost 23,000 election judges work early voting and election day in the primary. And of those 23,000, 76 were returning judges to get that extra little boost of pay. For the general, we had over 23,000 election judges, and of which 93 were returning election judges there. The election judge page program, we encourage the local boards to reach out and recruit students to serve. And we had 446 page applicants there. Both my kids had served as an election judge and a page. I'm not sure if they liked it so much, but again, my oldest liked the pay. The page was like, why wasn't I getting paid? I was like, there was a whole big thing about that. So definitely knowing that, that stat that younger people like getting paid. They don't do it for civic pride whatsoever. One of the things I want to just address too is that election judges were a contentious issue for the election. And I just want to state that the election judges administer the election without regard to partisanship. They're prohibited from engaging in partisan or political activity while during their work as an election judge. They are trained on how to conduct the necessary tasks to keep the polling place running efficiently and effectively throughout their entire early voting days and election days, which are about 13 hours. And an election judge's partisan affiliation does not impact or determine the outcome of the election. Voters are the only ones that decide the outcome of an election. Party affiliation of an election judge does not stop them from casting their ballots or disenfranchises any voters. To say otherwise would be disingenuous. I think that all 23,000 that were election judges in the general and in the primary did an unbelievably well job in administering this election. Canvassing. We, again, started the canvass prior to Election Day, and that assisted a lot in meeting the expectations of producing vote totals of significant number on Election Day. But, of course, this is contingent on voters actually giving us their ballots prior to Election Day in order to canvass this in a significant number, which we basically did in our outreach campaign as well. If you have your ballot, vote your ballot, and then return it as quickly as possible. And we had a lot of communication back with the voters, too, so that they were well aware of the process when the ballot was received by the local board, when it was canvassed by the local board, so that they then felt confident in the process themselves. Again, however, we had an unprecedented number of provisional ballots, duplication efforts on the web ballot deliveries, and our partial counts had required a lot of, I would say, manual processing during the canvass, and that impacted the certification deadlines. Again, we were very proactive to assuage any fears and conspiracy theories when the canvass is extended past the 10th day after the election. and one county had to certify well into December, on December 5th, and it was the longest that a county has ever taken to certify. We'd just like to publicly acknowledge the enormous effort that the local election directors and their staff and the volunteers that were part of this canvass, because they basically made sure that over 3 million ballots were counted and certified. Post-election audits, which is near and dear to a lot of members here. We had the automated audit, which was of the ballot images by an outside vendor, and that was 100% of the audit details, and it helped verify the voting equipment for us. We are conducting the manual post-election audits with the selection of full precincts by county and early voting day at one location. A sampling of provisional and mail-in ballots are going to be hand tallied. The local boards of elections have until March to complete this. So if you want, contact your local board and see when the manual audit will be taking place. Bring some popcorn. It's great. You know, it's fantastic. It's worthwhile. It's must-see TV. Additionally, we performed a pilot risk-limiting audit in Harford County, which went very successful. So overall, we had a lot of post-election audits. Just a little bit on procurement here. We are transitioning to a new campaign finance reporting system. We have a vendor selected, and so after this report here, which is going to be due, we're going to be transitioning into a new program for 2026. We have the poll book modernization project, which is, we have the project management team onboarded, and the RFP has been approved, so we are now moving into that phases of those procurements as well. The new voting system project is on task and moving forward as well. We have the project management team onboarded and working on the RFP. Now, one of the things is that, you know, we had careful consideration about the future of elections in Maryland, and we consulted with the local boards of election on this. We have delayed the procuring of the new voting system from the 2026 election to the 2028 election. This is due to the fact that the marketplace is not mature right now. There is the Election Assistance Commission has issued new VVSG guidelines to a 2.0 standard. There has been no vendors that have been certified to that standard as of yet. So if we had procured any equipment, it would be to the old 1.0 standard. So we're now waiting for the marketplace to mature. This will also allow greater time to test and review the voting systems for Maryland certification as well. So, you know, we are initiating our contingency plan, which is to use the current voting system for the 2026 election. The current voting system, of course, is safe, secured, and trusted. You guys have all voted on it. We just had a very successful election on it, and we're working with the local boards of election to make sure that this timeline is moving forward and no delays on that front there. And we're also procuring a new voting registration and election management system, and that's on track for the redistricting moving forward with that, and trying to look at new technologies, making that as seamless as possible rather than using manual entry with the redistricting efforts there. Campaign finance, I just want to bring that here again for everyone here. Welcome to session, welcome to not fundraising. So, you know, on that front there, your report is due tomorrow, so contact your treasurers tonight, make sure it's in. We're going to update the summary guide that will be released this winter. One of the things that we saw was that the appointment system worked well for candidate filings because it eliminated wait times. So we had over 860 candidate filings for the 2024 election, and we're going to be instituting that again for the 2026 election, so that should be up when you want to file for re-election. We have currently over 1,900 committees, but I expect that number to increase to between 23 and 2,500 active committees for the gubernatorial elections. And of course, I think we're going to see an increase in independent expenditure entities as well during the 2026 election. Overall, On enforcement actions, we collected over 150,000 in civil penalties in 2024. We did an audit of the 2024 annual report where 353 committees were sent deficiency letters. And we are, of course, very vigorously in our collection of late fees in Title 13, which is political committees, and Title 14 filers, which are businesses that have government contracts, and making sure that they file those reports timely as well. In public financing has grown steadily in Maryland. The state, one of the things was that the state, basically, the election law article 15.103 required that the state board determine whether the balance of the Fair Campaign Finance Fund has sufficient funds to provide for public contributions to 2 eligible gubernatorial candidates in a primary election and 1 in the general, which means the balance of the fund should be at minimum $9 million. When we had to notify the governor in June 30th of 2023, the fund was a little bit over $8 million. So we had to notify the governor that they had to include $623,723.05 to be in the annual budget. However, due to our enforcement actions, the current balance is over at $9.8 million right now, so no additional funds are needed to fully fund the program. So I think this is the first time in the program's history where we actually have a fully funded campaign public financing program. And again, this was done without any interest allocations because they're all being directed to the general fund for budget relief. Baltimore City had its first election with public financing. The state board supported it. There were 8 participating candidates, 4 were certified, and 1 was actually elected. Over $1.1 million was distributed. And in 2026, we have 4 counties, Montgomery, Howard, Baltimore County, and Prince George's will all have public financing programs that will be up and running, with Baltimore County and Prince George's being their first time doing the program. And Anne Arundel County is in the early stages of setting up their public financing system as well. And we're looking forward to and working with all the counties on that and developing more summary guides on those and frequently asked questions and outreach programs on those. Looking to the 2026 and 2028 elections, the gubernatorial election is in June of 2026, which means the candidate filing deadline begins actually February 25th, 2025. So in a little bit over a month or so, you guys can come back and see me in my office and file for re-election. When one election ends, we restart the clock and begin it again here. We're also looking for the 2026 to expand our language assistance programs that we had at polling places, that we had a pilot program in Prince George's, and we have already expanded language applications in voter registration and mail-in ballot applications on our websites to multiple languages already. Areas of concern, of course, as I go into the 2026 election, it's always going to be dis and misinformation, coupled with the viral nature of deepfakes and use of artificial intelligence to manipulate a voter's intent in going to the polls. And of course, dealing with that high number of provisional ballots, because that impacts the canvas later on. The 2028, we have one of the things is that I just wanted to make note of in the 2028 primary election, April 25th, early voting will be over the Easter holiday. So the quicker you guys work on that, the better off we are here where you want to put it, because then we can make sure that the 2028 calendar is set. Prior to that, it will help us as we move forward with our procurements as well, making sure that the new voting system and poll books are all on track. If it has to be adjusted, our timelines on that front there, but we just wanted to make sure about that. And for this legislative session, I want to thank Madam Chair for sponsoring our departmental bills. We have 4. bills out there, which you'll be hearing about soon enough. Most notably, just going through that. So we just want your support on those as we move forward. But with that, I just say thank you and welcome any questions. So.
Thank you. Ms. Berry, are you just here for moral support and questions, or?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, perfect. I do want to start by thanking Stan for organizing and Sarah for organizing, and you all for showing up and having us attend a canvas in Howard County. I think it was very enlightening, and it was really interesting. So thank you for that, and got quite a few questions. You must have been missed.
Exactly.
So we'll start with Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And that event in Howard County where we got to watch and count, and thank you, Mr. Demarinis, for joining us there, was very informative. So thank you, Madam Chair, and the team for organizing that for us. Congratulations on your first election, I guess 3 elections as administrator, Mr. Demarinis, and thank you for this robust briefing. I wanted to zero in on the length of time when it comes to the certification, and I am proud that we make sure that every single vote is counted, whether it's a provisional vote that we're investigating, a mail-in vote, or any other method that a voter chooses, but we know that it's taking quite some time to certify, and also the increase in provisionals. Can you comment on any thoughts that you have on how we can streamline, manage efficiencies, whether it's around the provisional voting challenge or just other reasons why we are taking a long time to certify? I will shout out Montgomery County, my county, because I know that we do take a long time, but we also had the most mail-ins. So shout out to all of our officials who are helping us to make sure that every vote counts.
So yes, so 2 factors really help, I would say, push it beyond the 10th day, which is provisional voting and ballot duplication efforts, because those are manual processes there. And Montgomery County, of course, has the highest number of both, which is why they always historically go past the 10th day. And web ballot delivery method is just, in the law, we were looking at some technology to help maybe streamline that effort instead of, having a bipartisan team manually duplicate the effort there, to see if we can try to make that more of a automated process with the duplication. And then provisional voting is, I'm looking at trying to make sure that we provide enough voter education to the voters on making sure that they understand, if they choose, say, mail-in voting, to vote mail rather than to vote in person, because of the provisional canvass that will take place, and that will start delaying the process after the fact. And also looking at why are people showing up at the wrong polling places. Some of the local boards call that like convenience voters. They just go to the first one that they see or know about, rather than the ones that they're assigned to. So, that's a little bit of an outreach program there, and making sure that people understand where they're assigned, and hopefully if we can get more communications with the voters, that they can their actual polling place and put it in their phone, and then they can just go right to the right location, rather than just try to find one there. But those are I would say the 2 biggest reasons why the canvass extends past the 10th day. And, we are working with them to shorten that with the voters.
Thank you so much. That's super helpful, and hopefully during this session we'll be able to work on some of those recommendations to streamline and help ensure we get to certification more quickly. I want to turn to the issue of voting for incarcerated individuals. As a reminder to our listening audience, in the state of Maryland, anyone who is serving time for a misdemeanor or is awaiting trial is eligible to vote. And we've done a lot of work as a legislature to ensure that access and put in place provisions to make sure that they have access to the ballot if they choose to vote. Can you talk in more detail about some of the processes, if you have numbers on voting for our incarcerated population, and some of the details on how that worked in the last election?
So we're going to issue a report later this week on our work with correctional facilities. I visited one, and one of the things is the population itself was unaware of how much they had rights to vote. So we worked with advocacy groups, making sure that they have knowledge with the population in correctional facilities. When I was there, I helped register an individual who never had registered to vote in her 53 years and was basically ecstatic that she was under misinformation that whole entire time and that now her voice would be actually be heard. It was very moving to help know that that individual now can actually vote. So yes, we are very committed to helping the people that are incarcerated but are eligible to vote. We have a program with the correctional facilities to make sure that they have voter registration applications to be distributed to the population, as well as mail-in ballot applications for them to receive their ballots. And we have drop boxes in those locations. Well, we will get you those stats and figures with the report that we'll be issuing later this week as well.
Delegate Ebersol, and then Delegate Patterson.
Madam Chair, and thank you. We can go through all that, but she said it really well. We're so pleased you're here. This is a pretty quick one. I just heard you said text to cure, and I'm very interested in people able to cure mistakes they make because there's a lot to keep track of. And what is that exactly?
So if you have a mail-in ballot and you forget to sign the oath, that ballot would not be counted because you forgot to sign the oath. But there's an opportunity for the voter to cure that signature. So we would, if we had your phone number, we'll be able to communicate with you and say, if you want, you can sign, you can sign this box on your phone and text it back to us, and then you'll be able to cure the signature because we will be able to capture that signature and then be able to say that now that ballot has been cured and be counted.
Off. But it's not just notification, it's actually a procedure for curing on your device.
Exactly.
Great, thank you very much.
Am I next? Okay, thank you. My question has to do with polling sites. We had some issues with one of the polling sites in my county, which resulted in the facility being unavailable or marginalized in terms of parking, et cetera, for the citizens and so the voters. And so there was some concern about voter suppression, dueling of events that were scheduled, et cetera. Is this something that you handle at the state, or is this primarily a local Board of Education issue?
It's a local Board of Elections issue. They're the ones that submit the plans to the State Board of Elections. There is a process so that if the voters or if concerned citizens are shut out at the local level, that before one of the plans is that they have to submit it to the State Board for approval. But it's done 6 to 7 months prior to an election. So the advocacy groups that are a part of that, I would recommend them making sure that they're aware, but the selection of the sites themselves are all done at the local level, and then it's approved at the board there, and then submitted to the State Board for further approval later on.
And lastly, are the agreements multiple years, or is it annually?
It depends, but that's sometimes they have facilities that they use all the time, like such as schools, because they get closed during the process. But if it's something else, then it's something that the locals themselves it's just probably for that 1 year, because then rates change, for rentals.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Delegate Feldmark.
Madam Chair, And thank you for the presentation and also for all the work you and your team have done to get us through this last election. My questions are around the web delivery and provisional ballots, right? We don't want to decrease the number of people who are voting, but we'd love to decrease the number of people who are voting those ways, right? On web delivery, I don't know if you have these stats or if you could get them for me. How many of the web delivery requests come after the deadline to request a mail-in ballot delivered by mail?
We'll have to get back to you on that one there, because that's a very narrow window between the two. Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm just wondering, how many of them are just sort of last minute and that's the only option left, right? And also on web delivery, do we know how many people are repeat, I don't want to say offenders, but,
that's right.
repeat web delivery voters?
We'll get you the stats on that overall.
And so depending on what that is, I'm curious if there could be any sort of direct outreach to sort of educate folks about, getting the requests in earlier and sort of the benefits of not relying on web delivery.
So I guess the one thing about web delivery,
Sure.
I just always want to say this, there are trends, which I kind of mentioned earlier, but it is still a safe and secure method that we, right? And I just, I just always want to say that it's, there are, I would say, concerns or issues on the back end for us for processing. But I still don't want to make sure that the voters feel safe and secure that if they receive a web ballot delivery, or if it's a voted web ballot delivery, that ballot will be counted in a method, so that there's nothing, not one method is better than another method of voting in the state. Just, I just want to always make sure that.
Right, and I think that's important, right? We don't want, a web delivered ballot is still a safe and secure way to vote, and it will be counted and counted accurately, and there is administrative burden associated with that, right? So the other question I had, looking at the provisional ballots and those, specifically those that were voted provisionally because the voter had requested a mail-in ballot, do you have a breakdown of web delivery versus mail delivery on those requests? And I'm guessing it may not be off the top of your head.
So right now, no, but one of the things was that during provisional voting and the application, there's codes on the bottom of it. One of the things was that one of the codes was this, that I voted or I had received a mail-in ballot, and it was a very broad code that was not really good for any detailed analysis.
I see.
So one of the things that I did was create a supplement to that, so that if they actually used that code, they had to fill out an additional form, which broke it down to saying, I did request a mail-in ballot by web delivery, I did request a mail-in ballot by mail. We are getting all that information since it's not inputted easily into the system there, because it's an outside the box thing there. We have to manually do that. One of the things is that we are trying to engage with the University of Maryland and helping with kind of doing some analysis on this front. Yes, this is one of the things that web delivery ballots, additionally where provisional voting occurred, what we saw anecdotally was a lot around colleges. And so that's something that I'm looking at maybe addressing with the colleges and their college plans to see if more education at that front there is needed, because, college students we saw were waking up around 7 o'clock in the night and then going out to vote and not necessarily voting where they actually live. At that point there, yes, I want to take a look at how we can, look at provisional voting and decreasing that number.
Great, Thank you.
Delegate Plakovich-Carr, then Delegate Hornberger.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Damaris, for being here, and just say you and your team continue to do a great job, so thank you all around. Two questions for you, actually continuing on this theme of provisional ballots and curing. I'll say in Montgomery County, I heard that that is starting to be something on our radar in terms of the number of provisional ballots that end up getting rejected because they're missing some piece of information. And I'm curious, now that we have fixed that issue with the mail-in ballots and allow for curing of mail-in ballots, do you have any recommendations of what we can do for provisional ballots to make sure that every valid vote is getting included?
There are a few things about provisional voting. In the primary, if a person votes a party ballot and that ballot is rejected if you're an unaffiliated voter, even if there's a school board election that you would be eligible for. So that's one way that we can help enfranchise voters along those ways there. The other method is, we are just, I think right now I'm starting to looking at provisional voting and making sure that this number was such a high number that it's not sustainable. And instead of waiting for another election for a high number of, of not sustainable provisional voting, we have to address it now and moving forward with it. And there is, you have to wait until, days afterwards because the provisional voting is, being cured or being looked at. And I think during that time period there, if there were signatures missing or anything like that, the local board should contact the voter as well to make sure that they come in and say if they have to provide residential information that they need, then they have the ability to sign the application if they forgot to do it initially.
But to clarify on that last point, do boards currently have that authority, or would that require a statutory change?
I'll have to verify that again, but and double check with the Attorney General's office.
Thank you. And then just one other question, changing topics here on ranked choice voting. There is growing interest among some municipalities in our state about holding ranked choice voting elections. And it's my understanding that for some of these municipalities, they're using the state's voting system, even though they run their own election. And our voting system right now can collect the data, but it can't tabulate ranked choice voting data. What path forward might there be for municipalities here in the newer term? Understanding that there's a procurement going on, it'll be in place for the 2028 election and subsequently, but is there anything else that we could be doing in the meantime to help these municipalities that are running their own elections but using your equipment?
So right now, what we can do for municipalities here is kind of interesting because we looked at all the laws here. I'm by law just only allowed to give municipalities a precinct voter registration list. The rest of the information was kind of not necessarily the correct way of helping municipalities. So I think there is some bills addressing that so that I can enter in MOUs with municipalities and providing some support. The ranked choice voting, if they want to go out, and the municipalities themselves should be able to procure the tabulation software because the changes to the ballot is easy. It's just, it's just adding offices and the vendor, we've talked about this, we can give you the first choice, second choice, third choice on a ballot. The program, when you put it in the scanners, it will tell you how many people voted for this. You're correct in your understanding is that it cannot tabulate and say this voter, this ballot was their first choice was dead last, so now we're going to go to their second choice, retabulate, their second choice was dead last, and then retabulate for a third time. That's got to be done outside the system, and the municipality themselves can go out and procure that. We'd be happy to kind of work with them and see that because they are, I would say, helpful in us understanding any new processes out there and how it would be implemented in the state of Maryland as well.
Okay, and so then the last question on that point, would a municipality need the state board to certify whatever tabulator they use, or that really is up to them?
No, that's completely up to them. Okay. We have nothing to do with their elections. Outside of Baltimore City, and that's not really, but the municipalities, they don't even have to use our equipment. They run their elections completely on their own.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Same vein. First off, I wanted to really thank you for all the awesome work that you're doing in bringing, the election board into the modern times, the technology upgrades. We got to see that firsthand at the site visit there during the polls, so that was incredibly helpful. I'll just bring up an anecdote, and it deals again with the municipalities. I recently worked a poll in the last election cycle, and the municipality where the polling location was decided to co-locate. So we had in the same building the typical regular elections, and then we also had the municipal elections right next to each other. But completely different vendors, completely different protocol. And in many instances, depending on which voter talked to someone there, they would know, hey, you can vote over there too for town. And this was new. This was something that municipality had not done before. However, it just seemed kind of duplicative, if I'm using the right word. So what can municipalities do now? What is your outreach and collaboration with municipalities? And how are we safeguarding and making sure that those municipal elections are at the same caliber that our typical elections are at?
So municipalities, I'll answer that last part first. They run their own elections. They have their own rules. They're not a part of the election law article whatsoever. So, basically, the jurisdiction of the election law article ends at county level elections. Municipalities can be on the state ballot if they so are inclined to. Current law has it as an 18-month lead time. I don't think that is necessary. I think we can cut that down to 12-month lead time for municipalities to join our ballots. I would welcome them to join our ballots because I think it would increase turnout in their elections, especially in elections when they have on the exact same day.
Agreed.
That statewide are occurring. But, they are very protective of their independence on that stuff there, but I have no jurisdiction, no authority, no enforcement over their campaign finance, their registration, or the conduct of those elections.
Okay, and then just a follow-on question, if I may. Again, anecdotally, there were folks that were showing up, had proof of paying taxes, living in corporate limits. However, they were not on the voter rolls. So that's just one example of where there's a discrepancy. What does the cure process for that look like?
So for a municipality, again, they themselves they have their own rules. So we would have, the voter registration lists, and if they would come on our ballots, then we would use our voter registration lists. They would appear, before probably the ballot questions as an office on our ballot. They would follow, I would say, majority of our state laws at that point there. But in your scenario there, because it was a separate location, the municipality ran it separately, I can't answer that question.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Wu?
Chair. Thank you. I have two questions. First question, can you share your cheat sheet with us? There are so many numbers there. I think.
Sure. We're going to probably do a post-election report that was, with more analysis on everything that we've done. So, yeah, we're just kind of getting the special election prep for the 2025 kind of delayed a little bit of the post-election report for us.
Okay, thank you. So I think one question to kind of follow up with the Delegate Feldmark about the web delivery or the self-printed ballot, right? That's the one that takes most time for people to really work there and get it through. What's the percentage of those votes in terms of all the votes we have?
So web delivery roughly is about 12 to 16% of the ballot requests, and the rate of return for web delivery was over 71%, I believe, in the last general election, but I can give you back those stats more specifically on that.
Right. So is there any, probably you have some effort already, right? Is there any way we can improve that process? Because that's really delayed the counting process and makes it last so many days. Is there any effort we can scan those tickets better instead of like we have 2%, one writing, the other verifies and goes through that? Makes much faster like other standard and the mail-in ballot.
So I think there's a lot of balancing that you have to do when looking at this, right? Like if you look at the process with the beginning, making sure web delivery, you know, it's not just sending out a regular email. It's got to be safe and secure, and it's got to go through a lot of security measures as well to make sure that it's there. Additionally, on the back end too, you want to make sure that the process is open and transparent, but also that you know, there's a perception that you don't want to have people saying, oh, I'm just marking ballots here or anything like that. So that's why you have to have those bipartisan teams there. So yes, there's a labor-intensive process there, but there's other considerations that, you know, are paramount too as we move forward with it, to making sure that one of the unique features is making sure that everyone understands and accepts the election results.
Sorry, my question is a little different. My question is there any way we can improve the counting process for the mail-in, those delivered, right, self-printed ballot?
Yes.
Make it faster, more
well,
efficient?
we're looking, but it's one of those things that you have to take into consideration all these factors. So yes, I'm trying to look at some new technology to help speed that up so that it's not manually done, but you know, it has to be safe and secure and also transparent in the canvassing process.
So it's still printed out, right? Like the mail-in ballot, just different size, then the machine couldn't read it. Is that right?
Right. So
we're talking the same stuff?
So basically, the paper itself, this paper here cannot go through the scan.
Yeah, that's my question, right? Is there any way we can make it quicker, faster, more efficient?
It has to be on a certified voting system as well. So that's something that we're looking at technology with our vendor.
I see, thank you. Another question about the permanent mail-in ballot. I kind of pretty interested to understand when people move in and move out to the state, if, for example, they're really close to the election, how do you make sure they don't receive the mail-in ballot?
So mail-in ballots, if you're on that list, you have to receive a notice prior to it, and that's one of our departmental bills, which is that we are going to, just to clarify it, to make sure that 120 to 90 days prior to the election, we would send out a notice to individuals on the permanent mail-in ballot list, making sure that they're still at that address and that they want to be on that mail-in ballot and that they are going to receive a mail-in ballot. So
is that a confirmation email letter?
So it's confirmation, right, a confirmation notice.
And then until you receive the confirmation, they're taken off the list or they're keeping?
No, they're on the list because it's sent to them. If it's mailed back to us with like the little yellow saying that they no longer live there, then that would be something that we would start the process for removal.
What are the consequences if they didn't respond but they moved out? You still mail-in a mail-in ballot then, right?
Well, I mean, at one point here, they moved out and they didn't respond. There is processes to remove an individual. You're talking about basically removing that person then from the voter registration list, and that is dictated by federal law as well with the National Voter Registration Act. If they update their address with MVA, then we would get that through our automatic voter registration process with the motor vehicles. So there's other ways that we can figure out how those individuals are moved in the process.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Wims.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for a successful election. My question is simply dealing with the polling books, and I know the state has them, and you've said they're old. So the question is, do you plan to put in some procurement in advance of the 28th election to update the books?
Yes, the 28th election, we're going to get new polling books.
Okay,
We're in the process now.
Thank you.
Delegate Young, then Delegate Miracle North.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Thank you for the briefing today. I got a little list of questions. I'm gonna list some of it.
Sure.
And like we could talk about the vast majority of this offline, and then I'll just ask the specific questions. But I want to talk, you talked a lot about automation and how that's going to potentially streamline processes, including web delivery. I can imagine a lot of processes could be automated within the Board of Elections. I'd be interested in talking about what that could look like.
Sure.
And then in particular, where the humans would be in the loop of those processes. Okay. Secondly, I have a question that we could talk about offline with regard to, there was a public financing candidate that then endorsed subsequently in the election, in the mayor's election. So we'd love to talk to y'all about what that looks like and kind of what the intent of it is and how that plays out in those circumstances. So
on that part there, before you get to your other list there, we do have regulations on the state to address that. Because those are county, or in that case, it was a city program, we would like them to follow our lead because I surveyed other states that have public financing programs, and talking about an endorsement and a suspension of a campaign rather than a withdrawal and repayment. So we kind of worked a very fine line, but we have regulations that were put out on that process and what the candidate who's publicly financing, who's suspended their campaign, and what they can and cannot do afterwards because of what happened in Baltimore City, and was also possibly in a gubernatorial election in years past as well. So this is kind of something, but now the city and the counties have to adopt the I would say, our model on that front.
Understood, understood. Back to your AI, back to talking about AI, misinformation and disinformation and deepfakes, another offline conversation. Yeah. And now to the questions that I want to ask you for now. You talked about ads and how many Meta accounts you were able to touch. Just a simple question is, was it just Meta that you were doing the ads with? Were you doing like TikTok or anything like that?
We weren't doing TikTok, but we did do other social media platforms. I can give you the report, what we have there. Meta, it was just such a staggering number that I just wanted to highlight.
Surely, surely. And then the last one, push notifications. You talked about push notifications and digital IDs, and you referenced MVA. I have my digital ID. I can see all the information, but then I'm not familiar with how you can leverage that for push notification potentially. But that being said, you have obviously the role of all the voters. Are you all, and we talked about text to cure a lot. Have you thought about a similar effort for when there's a polling site change and things like that, to send those like SMS, either a text or a push notification, and to get that information out? And then it probably could be leveraged on any number of other pieces of information you need to get out as well.
I think that's something that we'll have to address, but we don't necessarily have everyone's telephone number. So that's one of the bigger things too, which we always say, like, we don't collect that information. So, that's kind of a hindrance in us doing push notifications to everyone that would be affected by, say, an emergency closing, because we'd only be able to contact maybe a handful of those individuals rather than the entire affected population. But that's something I'd love to address and kind of look forward to, because, with those emergency things, getting notice to the voters is paramount.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Delegate Miracle North for our last and final question.
Oh, boy. Okay, it's pressure. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Mr. Oh, sorry, I'm new to the system, y'all, so I apologize. Am I doing it correct? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Damaris, for being here. Thank you for your passion, for being so mission focused on access. It's loud and clear, even through the data, so I really appreciate that. As you know, I introduced legislation last year dealing with multilingual election materials, and I appreciate you taking the time to show me the pilot program in Prince George's County this past general election. You said in your briefing that there's a 2026 expansion of this, but you didn't go into details. Could you just explain briefly what the expansion looks like? And is it based on the results of the pilot program, funding, or both?
So one, we've done all the applications now for voter registration and mail-in multiple languages on our website. So they're right then and there. You can look that up. I think they're already published now. And then, yes, we are looking at expanding Prince George's to other to other locations. And, with that, we're looking at grants, because we need to have iPhones and the setup costs associated with the vendor to help us. What she was talking about was a very cool program that we're going to actually put in front of the EAC for Cleary, which is like there are little awards programs there. But basically, it is a language assistance program where it's an app that you then can get, I'd say, every language known to man on there. If you're Icelandic, we have Icelandic on there as well. You can speak any language, and they have an interpreter that the election judge then will be able to speak in English to the interpreter. The interpreter in a video call would then be able to converse directly with the voter. The voter would converse in there with the interpreter, and it would just be seamlessly going forward there. We have a couple of technologically problems there, just like making sure that it's not, on speaker for everyone to hear, maybe with AirPods and everything else, but we addressed it, and it was quite successful with it in Prince George's County, and expanding it to the other places such as Montgomery and Howard, which would be beneficial at this point as well. But yes, we're looking. We need money. Everything needs money, so we're looking for grants.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that concludes our questions and the briefing for today by the State Board of Elections. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for being our first briefing. I think people were itching with the questions. Thank you. Folks, we are back at 1 o'clock, and they will have a presentation, which you will be able to see on the screen here, but if you want to bring your computer, you can pull it up on your computer as well. So see everyone at 1 o'clock. Thank you.